Hello, and welcome to the final Rant Rave review of Spooky October. There was going to be another one about Lovecraft and Lovecraft Country, but unfortunately I could not finish Lovecraft Country because it's kind of boring. To be perfectly frank, it's not scary and it's not Lovecraftian, so I gave up on it. But I'll write a little spiel about it in my reading roundup for this month, but whatever. Moving on to better things, 2 of the 4 perfect stories. What is a perfect story, you might ask? I've mentioned them numerous times. Basically, there is a scale of the goodness and badness of stories, and you can be good, and you can be great, and you can even be flawless. But that's not the same thing as being perfect. Perfect stories, not only are they flawless, but they aspire to a greatness above, over and beyond other stories. And as far as I can figure, there are only 4 in existence. I mentioned Erased in my Supernatural Cat and Mouse video. Today I will talk about 2 of them that are, they're not actually spooky, but they fit with Halloween. So, yes. And if you're watching this tomorrow, it still counts because it's All Saints Day, and the next day is All Souls Day, which is the same thing as Day of the Dead. So, it counts. Yay! Anywho. The first one is Ghost Trick, a video game you've probably never heard of, unless you really like Capcom. It's a tiny little game flake, came out on the DS. It's very little known, but anyone who's played it loves it, basically. It is so creative, inventive, it blew my mind multiple times. So, what's the premise? The premise is, well, the game opens where it's black. And there's a voiceover, and you're like, hey, this is me, and I'm dead. And it, like, has a spotlight on a dead body with its rear end in the air. It's very cartoony, by the way. The art is very cartoony and stylized, and you're like, and this is my body, because, like, do you see anybody else here? Oh, and also, I don't know my name. Oh, and also, I don't know who killed me. And so, basically, you learn, very early on, that if you don't solve your murder, well, either way, like, you're trying to solve your murder because at the end of the night, your soul is gonna, like, pass on or fade away, and that's it. So you have only one night to solve your own murder and figure out what happened. And, again, it's very, very cartoony, but the animation is gorgeous, like, wastefully smooth. There are 2 different law enforcement officers who, like, dance, and I swear it's just so they can show off their beautiful animation. There's one guy who has, like, a long white coat and a scarf, and he spins around, and it's just needlessly beautiful. But also very cartoony and very, like, abstract and stylized. There are foreigners in this game, like an unknown foreign agents, like, spies that are trying to infiltrate stuff, and they're just blue. They're just blue. I mean, you know, whatever country they're from, doesn't matter. They're just foreigners. YOLO, right? So yeah. Get that in your head as you're thinking about what happens in this game. So, what is the gameplay, you might ask? Essentially, you are a ghost, so you can haunt or possess objects. And you can, the ghost and the trick. Ghost is, you can press the thing and the screen goes red and you can see the little blue objects you can inhabit. And then you can use your tricks, which are to use those objects. For example, if there's a bicycle, you can spin the pedals. If there's a flashlight, you can turn it on and off. Yep. Like, it's things like that. And you might think, well, that's really stupid. How do you play a game like that? Well, obviously, you build elaborate Rube Goldberg machines with all these different devices so that, A, you can move around. Like, in the very first part, you have to kind of, you're dead in a junkyard, by the way, so you have to climb your way back up to a certain place. And the other thing that you can do, the other power, is to go back, if you see another body, not your own, you can't do this for yourself because that would kind of make the game irrelevant, but if you see somebody else's body, you can go into it, and you can talk to that person's soul. And they're like, I'm dead, who knew? And you can go back 4 minutes before they died and try to prevent their death. And I think it's 4 minutes because in Japan, the word for 4 is the same as it sounds like the word for death, so it's a pun. Because, of course, it's Japan, and they love puns. So, that's your game. That's the game. Build Rube Goldberg machines, try to prevent people's deaths. And you find this all out, by the way, because an adorable little talking light, which is probably, you're like, I don't know who this guy is, but apparently I can trust him. He, in the junkyard, tells you all this stuff. He's like, you gotta do this. Just trust me, kid. And you're like, I don't know who I am or what happened, so I guess I will. I guess. Yeah, it's that kind of game. So, basically, again, you're trying to solve this mystery, which is great, and you're trying to prevent different people's deaths along the way. So there's this one lady cop who constantly gets killed, constantly, and you constantly have to save her in different ways, different situations. It's like a running gag, but there are other people as well. And of course, it's more complicated than it seems. And of course, like all the best mysteries, there's a case that happened, years ago that you have to also figure out what happened, because that's the best kind of mystery that exists. So, anyway, it's a great game. It's so much fun. It's so inventive and clever. Like, just the gameplay is clever. The mystery is fun. And it blows your mind. I'm not going to spoil anything. But I just have to say, even if you don't like video games, please consider playing this one. It's easy enough for a layman to play. And the story is fantastic. Again, there were several parts where, you learn some new thing and it changes what you thought happened. And you learn another thing and it kind of blows your mind. And there's more people at play and stuff. And again, the way the camera, how in the opening scene it's black and then it has a spotlight. And sometimes you'll be listening to a phone call. You can also go through phone lines. That's one of your tricks you can do. It'll start off with a little spotlight on somebody and then it'll zoom out and show you what's actually happening in the room. And there's one scene near the end of the game where it does that. You're talking to this person on the phone and it zooms out and it blew my mind. Like, it changed everything that you think. You're like, ah! Yeah. It was one of the biggest twists I've ever seen in anything ever. And why is it perfect? Because, of course, it has no flaws, and it's beautiful, and it's fun, and it's engaging, but it's perfect. Because the ending, I didn't see it coming. I didn't see it coming at all. I should have. It was the kind of thing where once you learn this certain thing, you should just be like, oh, of course, I can do this. Didn't see it coming. And then it fits all the puzzle pieces together, and it's so satisfying, and you basically think, this is what had to have happened. Like, this, there would have been no other way to end it. It was flawless, perfect, beautiful. Play Ghost Trick. I cannot recommend it enough. So, second thing we're going to talk about is skeletons in the form of Coco, a Pixar movie that shockingly numerous people haven't seen. I'm one of those weirdos who, if Disney or Pixar makes a movie, except for Good Dinosaur, I will go and see it, as long as it's animated. I don't watch the vile remakes. Ugh. No, if Pixar or Disney makes an animated feature, I will go see it, because I'm just like, they usually make good things. Not all the time, Frozen, but usually pretty good. And Pixar are like, So, however, I think the reason that a lot of people haven't seen Coco is the ads were awful. And a lot of time Pixar ads are awful. I don't know if it's a different department or a different company, but they're just like, kind of not good. For example, Inside Out, a movie you also may not have seen. The ads made it look really boring, and I didn't even want to see it. I was kind of like, I'll see it because I trust them, but And then, a couple months before it came out, I read an article by someone who was a test audience and saw the first 45 minutes, and she wrote about how, yeah, joy and sadness have this whole thing going on, and they get pushed out into, like, the wider mind, I forget what it's called, and there's these islands of personality, and I was like, oh, there's, like, world building, and a plot, and that sounds actually really interesting. Why wasn't that in the ads? I don't know. Same thing with Coco. The ads for Coco were like, there's this kid and he wants to play music and his family doesn't want to play music. And you're like, that's been done 5,000 times in kids' movies. Not music, but like, the family randomly hates art for no reason, but he wants to be an artist. And he gets a magic guitar, and he goes to the world of the dead, And you're like, But I trusted Pixar. And my little brother and I went to see it. We watched the whole thing, and we friggin' cried. Because if you don't cry in that movie, you don't have a soul. And at the end of the movie, the credits rolled, and my brother and I looked at each other and were like, that was so good. Like, we were in awe. Like, just in awe. And the more you think about it, the more I thought about it, I was like, it's one of the perfect movies. Yeah. I think my aunt, I was listing off 3 of them, and she was like, what about Coco? And I was like, how could I forget Coco? Yeah, Coco is so much more than some dumb kid who wants to play music and his family doesn't like him. Okay. So for those of you who've seen it, you know. Those of you who haven't seen it, let me explain the beginning. And a little bit of what happens. I don't want to spoil it because you just need to see it and weep openly. But anyway, so it starts off with a little boy who is friggin' adorable, by the way. He's like 10 or something. And I think they had an actual 10-year-old voice actor because some people still have respect for... I hate when they get like a 20-year-old man to play like the voice of a child. It bothers me. Anyway, little kid, and he's basically saying how a long time ago, his great-great-grandma fell in love with this man who was a musician. And they loved each other, and they both loved music, and they had a baby girl together, but one day he left because he wanted to become famous and play for the world, and she never saw him again. He basically abandoned the family. And so she was like, well, fine, and she closed the door on music and decided that she was going to make a living as a shoemaker. And then as like the generations go down, all of their family are shoemakers, and they hate music because it almost destroyed their family. And so you're like, okay, first off, there's a legitimate reason to hate music. It's not just like, oh, we randomly hate art because stereotypes, play a sport, or whatever. Like, no, they were abandoned by the breadwinner of the family, basically. But it's also comical to the extent this family hates music. Like, there's a part where there's like random mariachis walking out in the street, and they throw things at them, and they run away. And there's gonna be a Day of the Dead, I guess, concert talent show type thing that Miguel is a little boy, he wants to play in, and he's talking to this musician, and the grandma, who is so there's a great-great-grandma who got abandoned, her daughter, whose name is Coco, by the way, Grandma Coco, and then the grandma, who's Coco's daughter, she, like, chases a musician away, and so it's just funny. It's like, it's played up on purpose, how much they hate music. But Miguel loves it, and he's so cute too. Like, he's really sweet with Grandma Coco, who's kind of like, has dementia, doesn't remember anything really, but he always talks to her, and is very, like, kind and sweet, and he's adorable. Like, he's such a likable character, just immediately. And so realistic, too. Like, talks like a little kid talks. Like, there's part where he's like, I used to run like this, but now I run like this, and it's way faster. And you're just like, you're so cute. No. Yeah. And he has this little secret, like, music shrine in the attic of their house where he has this handmade guitar and all these old records and old VHS tapes of this famous musician named Ernesto de la Cruz. And it's kind of like 1950s black and white, very big musical numbers, and he puts the tapes in, and he watches them, and he plays them, and and then Miguel narrating is saying, you know, he's the most famous person. He came from their town. Their town has this, in the graveyard, there's a big, like, mausoleum that's where Ernesto de la Cruz's body is, and it says, Remember Me, which is his most famous song, and it goes, and it shows, it's basically like him watching the tape, but then it goes and shows in full color, Remember Me, with all these girls dancing, and there's tears, and he's playing his guitar and walking down the steps and singing this beautiful, ridiculous song about, like, remember me. It's this love song. And he's singing, and Miguel is narrating about how great he was until he was killed by a giant bell. And it shows in the performance, everybody's watching and falling in love with the song, and one of the stagehands accidentally knocks on a lever, and the bell that's in this big musical number falls on De La Cruz, and Miguel says, I want to be just like him, and it's so cute, and I love this character. So number one, great characters. Like, yes. And then, stuff happens. Basically, there's a fight with his family, and he is... Oh, it's also Day of the Dead. If you don't know, which... I was watching somebody's review of this movie, and they were like, it's really cool to see a different culture and learn about their traditions. And I was very confused. And I was like, oh, that, like, reviewer lives in Chicago. Because I live in Arizona, and my mom taught Spanish, and she lived in Tucson. So Day of the Dead isn't unusual to me. It's also, like, the Mexican version of All Souls Day, which really isn't unusual. So I was very confused by the whole, it's a different culture. And I was like, yes, it is, technically, but yeah. Anyway, if you don't know what Day of the Dead is, it's basically a day to remember, celebrate, and pray for your dead ancestors. And in Mexico, it involves, like, you make a little ofrenda altar with, like, pictures of the dead, and you put little, like, you know, food offerings, and you go to the graveyard, and you pray for them, and it's very festive and lively. The colors in this movie are beautiful. The color palette, like, of course it's gorgeous because it's Pixar, but, like, extra beautiful because it's Day of the Dead. Anywho, it's Day of the Dead. He has a fight with his family over music. They find out that he wants to go play in this musical thing. And they have their ofrenda, where they have all the pictures of all the different shoemakers in their family, all the aunts and uncles, and the great-great-grandma, who's kind of the matriarch. Like, it's her rule. There's a picture of her and Coco, Mama Coco, as a little baby girl, and the husband who left them, but his head is ripped off because they don't want anything to do with him. Like, he's not part of the family. And, they have a fight, and I forget somebody ends up knocking over the picture off the altar, and Miguel grabs it, and he notices that it's folded, and the husband, when you unfold it, he's holding Ernesto de la Cruz's guitar. So he realizes that, like, Ernesto de la Cruz is his great-great-grandfather, and the music is in his blood. So he's like, so he runs off. They have a fight. He runs off. The sun is going down on Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead, and he breaks into Ernesto de la Cruz's tomb, which is in their city, because that's where he was from originally. And he sees the really beautiful guitar, and he grabs it, but then he hears someone, like the guard of the graveyard, coming, that someone broke into the tomb, and he freaks out, and he drops the guitar, and the guard comes in, and he tries to run past the guard, and he runs through him, which is really weird, and he freaks out, and he runs out of the tomb into the graveyard, which now is full of people who are praying for the dead. So there's lots of living people. But there's also lots of skeleton people. Which little Miguel can now see. And of course he's freaking out. He trips and falls in a grave, because of course, you gotta have that scene. And he's helped up by these skeleton people who he kind of recognizes. And they're like, Miguel? Wait, Miguel? Like, you can see us? And he's like, wait a minute. And he realizes from their bone structure and from seeing their pictures on the ofrenda that they're his, like, great aunts and uncles and family members. Not the great-great-grandma. She's not there. But he sees them and he's like, whoa, like, what is happening? And they're like, we don't know. This is weird. This doesn't happen. And it also explains that on Day of the Dead, that's the one day when dead people can come into the world of the living to look at, to kind of visit their families who are alive. And it's really cute. All the skeletons are like, oh, look how big she's gotten and all this stuff. Because, like, they see their living family members on this day. And so they know Miguel because they've seen him growing up all the other Days of the Dead. He kind of knows them because of their pictures. And so they're like, okay, like, we'll figure this out. And they also mentioned that there was a reason that the great-great-grandmother couldn't come visit. It was weird. Normally she can. And so they go, and they're in the cemetery, and then when they get to the end of the cemetery, they basically cross into the world of the dead, which is this beautiful marigold bridge. Marigolds are a big thing in Day of the Dead as well. And this part, like, it's gorgeous. The world of the dead is, I can't even describe. Like, picture, like, bright, beautiful, saturated oranges and purples and pinks and beautiful colors. And amazing world building. Like, the world building in this movie, people should just take a class on world building. Because first of all, visual storytelling. If you notice, the bottom of the city, everything's like, it's built into these giant towers. The bottom level of the World of the Dead is all like Aztec pyramids because they were the oldest people in Mexico. So, well, amongst others, but yeah, the old natives of Mexico. And then as it goes higher, it gets more and more modern, basically. So the mid-level is kind of, I guess you would say, like 1930s-ish level. It's very cute and very, I just love it. Beautiful. And anyway, and everyone's skeletons because, of course, if you know anything about Day of the Dead, skeletons. Everyone's depicted as skeletons, so it's very cute. Anywho, so they get to the, like, customs border, and they're like, anything to declare? Because most people bring back the little food offerings that they got from their families, like bread and pan dulce and little things. And his family's like, they hold up Miguel, and the skeleton is like, the border skeleton. And so they go to this bureaucrat, and that's where you finally meet the skeleton version of the great-great-grandmother, whose name is, like, escaping me. Yeah, I don't remember her name. But she's, like, irate because for some reason they would not let her cross the world of the living, and the bureaucrat's trying to explain, like, look, if your picture's not on the altar, you can't go into the world of the living. I'm sorry. And she's like, my picture's always on the altar. My family always puts the picture on the altar. And then Miguel shows up, and they're like, what is going on? And he shows that he still has the picture of her and Coco and the guitar, so he has the picture that's usually on the altar, which is why she can't go back. And they're like, okay, that makes sense, but why is he here? Why is he in the land of the dead? And the bureaucrat is like, oh, well, he stole that guitar, and it basically brought on a family curse. And they're like, okay, how do we deal with that? And he's like, oh, well, the way you break a family curse is to get your family's blessing. Which, again, world building. And so the great-great-grandmother is like, okay, fine, okay. Like, and she picks up a marigold. I guess you have to, like, touch them with a marigold, because it's, like, part of the bridge. And so she's like, okay, Miguel, like, I give you my blessing to put my picture on the altar and to never play music again. And he's like, I'm not doing that, what? And so she's basically trying to force him, like, you have to go back, but you can't play music anymore because it's horrible. See, you got in this situation because you stole a guitar. Music is cursed. Don't do it. And so he is, like, really upset, and he runs off. And so he basically is thinking, I need to get back to the land of the living. So I need my family's blessing. But they're not my only family here, because Ernesto de la Cruz is my great-great-grandfather, so I'll get his blessing. And he'll let me play music because, duh. And so there's this whole adventure in the land of the dead, and there's other characters who are adorable. Oh my goodness. There's this, like, scrappy skeleton named Hector who assists Miguel, but he's kind of like, not a lowlife. He's not a lowlife, but he seems like he easily could be, and I love him very much. He has this whole story as well. So it's just great and cute, and I don't want to say anything, because if you've seen the movie, you know how amazing it is. But let me just say that one of the reasons it's perfect because the world building is amazing, the characters are amazing, there are no flaws, and you know how Pixar movies make you cry? This one, I don't want to spoil anything, but let's just say it's not a musical. It's actually, but there are many songs in it, but it's not a musical because they're diegetic. They're part of the world. They're songs that Miguel sings or other people sing, like they actually perform them in the movie as part of the world. And there's this one song that depending on who's playing it, it means different things throughout the movie. And there's one part where it's obviously like a tearjerker. And there's one part where it plays at the end of the movie. Oh my gosh, I'm probably gonna cry. I don't want to spoil anything, but let me just say, there's the song, when they play it at the end of the movie, it can be interpreted in so many different ways, and so many different, like, family relationships come in. If you just think of the last time that song is played, if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. Like, beautiful familial relationships, every single kind, and when you really think about it, you're like, it can be about death. Like, it can be about, like, your dead relatives, and then, you just bawl. Like, somehow Pixar just found that formula, just press the button and make people weep openly. But all the music is also great. The very last song that plays in the movie, like, before the credits, that song rocks, and I wish it got more love, because it's so good. Anyway, you will cry. You will cry! And the other thing, without any spoilers, is I was talking to my aunt, and she was saying that she thought there might have been a flaw, like a plot hole. But then when she rewatched it, she was like, no, because the dog explains, there's a dog in it, by the way. He's one of those gross hairless dogs from Mexico that are actually kind of cute, but they're kind of gross. If there's any part where you're like, oh, that seems like a little too convenient, think about everything that happens, and then think about what the dog is doing in that scene. I'm not going to spoil it. It's too great. See Coco immediately. You've been warned. See it. There's no excuse not to see it. It's one of the 4 perfect films, and it's the only one, or stories. It's one of the 4 perfect stories, and it's the only one that's not from Japan. What? It proves that Westerners aren't completely useless. Yeah, no, Coco is so good. See it for Day of the Dead, November 2nd. You've still got time. It's about family. It's about music. It's about heart. And you'll weep openly, but there's no shame in that. There's no judgment. It's just beautiful. So, happy Halloween. Happy All Saints Day. Happy All Souls Day / Day of the Dead. Yeah, see you next time. Bye-bye.